Good evening. Welcome to our town hall meeting. This is the last one that we have planned, and my name is Frank Wingate. We're here to talk about, we've had 3 of these meetings, to talk about the progress from our spring town hall meetings. And as far as we're concerned, we have lots of information to show you, to tell you about. I'm telling you on the front end, there's a lot, so pay attention. If you don't have a little card, you can jot notes down, ask a question, or make a comment. And if you're not interested in talking in the room here, you can leave it in the 2 baskets at the back on your way out, and be sure we'll take a look at all of that. So feel free to speak up when we have the question and answer session at the end, and we'll get started here in just a minute. Before we do, I want to open in a prayer. But before we get into that prayer, I want to tell you the backstory on it. Brad Smith and Jim Tyndall had the good fortune of having a class of 6th graders in the confirmation classes. And they were having some conversation the other day, and they were talking about the difference between the church and the church building, and the fact that the church building may need to change as we do God's work to bring more people to Advent. So they offered to write a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, bless us through the growth of this church. Please provide us assurance for this journey of growth. We ask for generosity, love, and support from the whole congregation. Help us in the good times and the hard times of this process. Provide us commitment to your will to stay on track. Give our leaders knowledge and smarts to make good financial decisions. Amen. Okay, so why are we here? We talked about it earlier with the spring town hall meetings. This is a follow-up, and we want to update you on the progress and all the good work that has gone on with a couple of committees that we have. The Campus Planning Committee that's chaired by Randall Bentley, and the Generosity Committee, which is chaired by Steve Bloomquist. And what's the plan? Why do we have a plan out there? In 2013, leadership and the council came together and wanted to put a strategic plan to take us into the next few years of the growth of Advent. Those demographics illuminated a tremendous need, and we're going to get into addressing those needs in just a minute. But before we do, it's only appropriate that we give thanks to the many people that have served in various committees, whether it's a building committee, a stewardship committee, other groups of people that came together that have yielded what we have here now, this beautiful campus and all the buildings that are a part of it. And then the last thing that can't go unnoticed is the Advent fishermen. From the initial worship service of 17 to now that we have over 2,300 members of our church, of which just on Sunday, we brought our 204th new member to Advent for this year. Now, Gary Hyman, chairman of the church council, has a few words for you.
I'm not sure how the number 204 hit you when Frank mentioned that. It's our largest number we've ever had, just so you know. But there's a couple statistics I want to share with you that may even bring that more into perspective. The latest Pew study was out, and that got kind of a national press. They keep trying to claim that the world is going more nuns than Christians, and some people seem to be so excited about putting that kind of word out there. But the fact of the matter is, of the over 400,000 churches in the United States, the sad fact is that over 90% of them are in decline. That's a sad fact. To bring it home to us a little bit closer here, though, when we had our charge conference last year and our superintendent was here, he shared another statistic with us, and that is that of all the churches, the Methodist churches in South Carolina last year, over 50% of them did not baptize one person. Let that sink in. That means no infant, no new member. So, brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work to do. but we also have so much more to be thankful for. It's no coincidence that Jesus' last commandment is our first priority. And we're going to share a lot of facts and figures, but the one thing I don't want you to lose sight of is our mission. To go out and make disciples of Jesus Christ throughout the entire world. Now, Michael told us yesterday in the sermon that, it was Jerusalem, and then you kind of went out to some other places. Now, one place you didn't even really want to go, but they went. Well, the good news for us is we really don't have to go very far to find an amazing amount of folks that need a spiritual home. And now that we also have a pastor from Lyman, we make our mission a little easier. Our mission is fishing, right? And so we all talk about that. And we shared with you in the spring that it's amazing how well stocked our pond is. Now, when I say that, we've done a couple things over the last couple years to prepare for today and the future. One of them is we asked you, the congregation, to take a survey. So over 300 of you participated in our internal survey, and we learned a lot about that. The other thing we did was we contracted for a percept study on the 5-mile radius of this church. So walk out that door and 5 miles in a circle, and we found out some amazing things. So let me share some of those with you, because you might not be able to see the details either. So the fact of the matter is, if you walk around 5 miles from here, you're going to run into 87,500 people will be in this 5-mile radius over the next 3 years. 2,300 new residents each year will be coming into our market. And if you look at the construction going on around here, I think they need to revise the numbers. The population that's going to come here is going to be younger than the average population. In fact, the largest growth segment in that 5 miles of population growth are going to be children 12 years and younger. We are so blessed in our pond. In fact, from a financial standpoint, our average income is 27% higher than the national average at $85,000. We also have a very strong connection to mainline denominations in our 5-mile radius. I make mention of this because most people say, well, if you're not a church person, you probably are one of those that want to go to those big, new, cool, churches, and you're after this non-denominational. But that is absolutely not the fact in our pond. In fact, mainline denominations are the most prevalent. The other fact that I don't have on the slides, but was somewhat interesting, is do we want contemporary or do we want traditional? And the answer is yes. 50-50 in the survey, and guess what we have here? Almost dead on 50-50. If you were here yesterday, in fact, let me grab that number too, that was kind of fun. So if you were here yesterday, 764 of you came and worshiped in 3 services, 388 at 9:55, and 376 if you add the first and the last, traditional. Frank made mention of the wonderful people who have served before us. In 2001, this became our sanctuary and our home. Now, I don't think they planned for it, but how fortunate are we to have a sanctuary where you can do contemporary and traditional so nicely, right? Because we've been to some churches that are so traditional that they've been forced almost to create a new atmosphere for a contemporary service. So we're very blessed for that. The last thing that I think we're really blessed for, and the reason why this is also exciting, I had the opportunity to participate in the 20th anniversary of our church, and we had a presentation. In fact, it was the first congregation effort that we had in the CLC. It was our 20th anniversary. And then we did this presentation and all. But I ran across this little snip of an article that was in the United Methodist newspaper. And it talked about in March 19th, 1987, the bishop came by and George McDuffie looked out here and he said, this is where we're going to plant a new church. It's going to be called Advent. And they're going to have a service. It'll buy 7 acres. And then this, in the pink down there, this rookie pastor, Smoke Knipe, at the time said, well, it makes sense because Greenville's going to grow and 33% of the growth is going to be in this section off Woodruff Road. And I thought, well, how smart was that for them to do that at that time. Now, some of you have heard the story of when George came out, he looked and he saw the burning bush, and he knew this was the place to be. He probably also looked at a percept study. But the fact of the matter is, we knew that was the case then. But, it just struck me when we were preparing for this, at the end of the day, we're still there. Our opportunity to bring people to Jesus Christ is every bit as good as it was in 1987. In fact, some would argue that it might even be better. What a blessing to be in that situation. I tell you, it's unique for churches as a whole and Methodist churches, for sure, in the state of South Carolina. 27,000 people within 5 miles of this church say they have faith, but they do not have a faith home. Forces us to ask some questions. So first of all, how many of those 27,000 will come and join us and call Advent home? We've been fishing pretty well this year, 204. What ministries do you offer to these folks? I mentioned the fastest growing segment is going to be children 12 and under. Young parents all over this place coming in now that houses are turning over. And then lastly, where are we going to put everybody? So let me just move to that point. The good news is I don't have to try to solve that one. We've got some great people that are working on that. This is our beautiful campus, as seen from one of those drone things, that fly around now. And it's a great layout, and we have new parking, and we don't have parking problems anymore. We solved that. But again, where are we going to put all these people? And so let me show you the people that are wrestling with that right now. So Randall Bentley's our chairman, and then Will Aiken, David Ashmore, Ron Farrell, Chad Turner, Jim Hopkins, Brooke Harmon, Michelle Dotson, Wendy Oates, and Camille Wingate are the team. Now, Randall worked off trustees last year, and he thought he was ready to just go out and play golf and do all that kind of stuff. But we said, Randall, we got a little issue here we want you to tackle. Would you please take this on, and let's put a good team around you and go after it. So, again, they've been on this now for about 16 months, working on this issue. And we, leadership, we, council, said, Randall and planning team, 2 priorities, 2 things we want you to do. First and foremost, on our 14 acres that we have here, give us a master plan. Give us your best plan for what we could do if we maximize this campus. Because as we go about making decisions, it helps us to know what we think we can put here and there for the future. That's what this is all about, the future. So do that, please. And then secondly, through a 2008 strategic planning session and through a 2013 planning session that your council now started on, we developed 5 priorities that we felt were wins. What's important now? And this was in 2013. What's important now? We had 5 of those, and those are listed here for you. So A is we need more seating in the sanctuary. We need to create a connecting space. A little bit on that. You and I both know that Sunday was a great day for us because we could walk outside and we could actually stand outside and greet and meet and chat and, talk to each other. And for people who may be a visitor, we could chat with them outside too. But unfortunately, we're in a situation where you can only do that if the weather's really nice. If it's raining, if it's cold, we don't connect. Except you 955ers, now I'm 11:15 or so. You 955ers get out there and make a lot of noise in our narthex. And it bothers us. So we have to rush your connecting time. But we need a space so that when we go out of this door, we don't feel like we have to rush to our car. That is critically important. And I'm going to introduce somebody in a minute that's going to tell you even more how important that is. But people want to know that this could be a home, that they could come and have their children and they could raise their children here. It would be a place that they would feel comfortable in. And they need that. We need it too. I joke a little bit about 11:15 and 9:55. I don't get to see some of you. That'd be so neat if we could just grab a cup of coffee somewhere out there and just have a little chat. Or we could have, a meeting, just a quick impromptu with 10 of us sitting around in a space. So we're going to talk more about the connected space. Number 3, vibrant children's education space. Kids need to be able to walk into an education space and go, wow, this is cool. And it's very important for the parents to hear them say, oh, my child just said, wow, this is cool, right? Because that's driving. And parents make choices about church based on the education of their children. That's our 3rd priority. Fourth, office space for staff administration. Now, some have really nice offices, and some have close proximity to others. I'm sitting here looking at Chad. Chad's actually, Chad and Ann and Don and Tori, they're close, right? Y'all are a close group. They're kind of forced to be because they're in our old sanctuary, which is now our current music room, but it's the office, so. And then Lee, she has an office, but she's wet the hill. So anyway, and if we're going to grow, we're probably going to grow staff, so we need space for now and the future. And then lastly, youth space. We have one of the most incredible youth situations here, and the worship on Sunday night's huge, and they do it in the gym. So how cool would it be if they had their own kind of worship space? So those are the 5 priorities we put forward to that group. And then this was taken yesterday. Some people aren't always, we've had some questions about, do we really need more space? And so this was yesterday at 9:55. Just so you know, we're planning for the future. But today, 2 years ago, we were at 80% capacity or greater 13 weeks out of the year. And this year so far, 26 times, our service has been at 80% or better capacity. So without a doubt, we need some more space. And so Randall and the team have brought on an expert, and I want you to meet Ron Geyer. Ron is an architect here in Greenville, Good City Architects, and that is a whole list of churches that Ron has been involved with. And if you go to Good City's Architects website, and I encourage you to do that, you'll find out that this isn't just about buildings. This is about building the kingdom, God's kingdom. And he gets church like nobody gets church. And we're blessed to have him with us on this project, and we're blessed to have him here tonight. So with that said, Ron, come on up and chat with the folks.
Thank you for the chance to work with your team on this. It's been kind of a neat exercise to see, well, it's always a neat exercise to see ministry turned into space, and it's easy to make the case that the buildings don't matter, and in fact they aren't the church, but it's where community happens. We've had a recent conversation, and despite what you read on the internet, community really can't happen without presence. You really can't have a meaningful community without presence, and you can't have presence without places. Now, you balance that off against the biblical reminder that it's all going to burn, so you have to act with discipline as you build. So, but thank you. This is a chance. What we want to do is describe where we are in this process, very early in the process. It's important for you to know that. There are lots of decisions that have not been made. It's also important to see this in context of the master plan. The master plan that was put together envisions a number of different pieces that respond to the 4 or 5 targets that you saw from the charge to that committee. If you'll go to that next slide, you see there's a number of pieces. The red block is what we'll talk about in a moment. Youth expansion has the potential to happen next to the CLC, possibility of new education space, new worship space down the road. But right now, we're going to focus just on that block right there, the connector and facility that will also handle some much needed facilities in support of worship and in support of administrative activities. In each case, I'm going to show you some floor plans. I will describe them in case you're not used to looking at floor plans, and also because you can't see them on these screens very easily. So this is going to be one of those imagine if you will moments as we describe the images. In each case, for each plan, we'll show you a plan of what you have now, and then I want you to compare that to where we think you should be headed in order to respond to your needs and your ambitions for mission. We're in this space here. You may recognize some pieces. It's color-coded, but you have the sanctuary proper. You have media room and the rooms in support and back, restrooms at the back, and the narthex. And look at the ratios of space and how much is occupied. This sliver along this edge is the platform on which I'm now standing, and there's some worship support space behind it. Go to the next slide. We're envisioning that in this volume alone, that by simply removing the support space immediately at the back, that we have the opportunity to increase seating by up to around 80%. And it's quite accidental that we ended up with LSU colors here, but the yellow here are the new seats. And you'll see, you can barely pick out in here the layout of the existing pews. And you can sort of do the arithmetic in your imagination for that. What's very difficult to see in here is also some provisions we've imagined to make it easier to move from worship form to worship form, not just from early service to 9:55 to late service, but over periods of time. And so we've sort of imagined changing the topography of this platform to give the choir appropriate space, not only for what they do now, but how they might grow, and give them proper space, that we simplify this platform, and that we create a platform for the band. And one of the most challenging things that they have, worship musicians, one of the hardest things they have to do now is every week between services is shift equipment and shift people and shift furniture. And so this will give us the opportunity to leave that in place. But at least as importantly, the idea is that we have a flexible platform that is not so tightly fit to one way of doing worship that it can't accommodate new ideas, new ways of doing things, experimenting on special occasions, bringing in groups from different places, and give so that worship the form of worship doesn't become as rigid as the walls themselves. You can see that in context of the larger space, and some folks have asked, so what happens to our bathrooms if we push them out of this room? And this is what was the red block on the master plan drawing. And there's the seam where the porch is now on the back edge of the sanctuary. And we had set up in that space cry room and AV controls and sound lock, so the people that are irritating Gary shall not any longer. And this connecting space or connection space or commons, or the old term for it is narthex or vestibule. And long gone are the days where narthex was built just big enough for a table and a sleeping deacon. It's a space where you encounter people. I've talked with some folks as our culture has sort of flipped. A generation ago, when church was a normal part of everyday life, people found a church that they liked, whose message they liked. They signed on the dotted line and became part of that organization. They participated in ministry, and then they became part of the life and the community of the church. Well, nowadays, those messages are cheap. We can get those online. We can get those from any place that we want to find them. Podcasts, whatever the case may be, yelling in both of our ears simultaneously. So the way people validate all this stuff that they're hearing is they search for wisdom, and they tend to validate wisdom by authenticity. And so that whole system that was described in Acts 2 that talks about people becoming part of a community and then, working together and sharing together and becoming a community is flipped on its head. And people first come and see if they fit into the community. And if they discover that you're decent folks, that you're interested in their lives, that you're nice to people more often than not, that you are a community worth being part of, then they say, I might spend more time here. And they begin to participate in ministry. As they begin to participate in ministry, they make the decision to hear what you have to say. And so that whole sequence is flipped on its head, and we've got to create space for that. How many of you have ever stopped to ask someone how their wife or how their children are doing in the hallway and irritated 10 people who were stacked up in the hallway behind you or in this narthex or vestibule? Basically, your building has contradicted your ministry in that case. And so we're creating a wide space for that. I'll show you what that's about. Also on that same level is space for rehearse and preparation of choir, places to store instruments for ensemble rehearsal. And then we have toilets available on that same level in this schematic. And We have men's toilets, we have women's toilets, and we have family toilet, which is kind of a newish concept. It's a bathroom for moms with young sons or dads with young daughters or older couples that help each other. So that's a part of that idea. And that little bit of red that you see there is a connection, a direct connection to the education building. Okay, go to the next. Upstairs from that is space for offices. The volume of the commons or the connecting space is 2 stories. The lowest portion of that adjacent is the music facilities, and the upper portion of that is offices. There's room for every office that we figured out. It seems like every time we come to a meeting, somebody thinks of someone else. But we have room for growth in that office area. And so it's possible for the office to function independently of the rest of the campus, be operated separately for some operating efficiency. Go to the next one. The education building looks like this now. If you just kind of squint your eyes without reading the labels, you can see that there's lots of different colors mixed together. And with this just color-coded by use, but some of that's choir, some of that's office, some of that's youth, some of that's adults, some of that's children, preschool and adults. With a revised plan, what we want to do is try to put the age groups together as much as possible. There's more than one way to do that. We've looked at several, but the idea is that we minimize the amount that adults wander through preschool area, that people, it's just a fact of life that we like to take that measure for security, and organized by age group. And we have, are able to, by cleaning it up, we're able to add some units for each age group in here. These are a little more technical drawings, and but they're preliminaries. And really all that you can conclude from these is that it's a commitment to use, take our cues from this building and use that for the architecture of the rest of anything we add new. Slices cut through that. You can see the sanctuary, the same color there, 2-story volume of the commons, music facilities there, offices overhead, a connecting corridor that connects from the upper parking lot down to the lower portion of the site, and a slice through that to see how all that knits together. We put together some ideas about I hope what you notice here are people more than anything else. The idea is to build a simple volume. Somebody said, well, where is the coffee counter? Yes, the coffee can be in there. There, you can put any kind of resources, information. It's the idea that this is a kind of place where someone who is not sure that they're supposed to be here, not sure where they're supposed to do, can begin to find their way around. I told the story that when I go shopping, the only thing more annoying to me than being asked if I need help is not being asked if I need help. And what we like to do as visitors to a new place is control our experience. So we're trying to do as many things as we can to make it possible for people to find their way. And we put in a notion of how you might get from the upper to the lower. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a bit of a hill here with some steps, and we're trying to turn that into a virtue and create this entrance that can connect those and get you from the upper part of campus to the lower part of campus so that folks are encouraged to use the rest of the campus parking. And then this notion of the building opening into this central court. I didn't talk about it much, but one of the features that I think we undervalue on this campus is this central green here that is nicely landscaped, and as your perimeter changes, the core can stay the same. So I think that describes mostly what we have in mind, and I'll return this to.
Now's the fun part. And by the way, pay attention because we have a test on all these numbers here in just a little bit. We're thinking that the estimate for the new building, the connecting space building, is about $4.2 million. Currently, our debt is about $1.8 million. And keep in mind, that started out at 2.7, so we paid it down substantially from when we started just a couple, 3 years ago. So we're looking at a total funding commitment of about $6 million. Currently, we're prepaying the debt a little bit every month. But the most important thing is to think about where we're going to be when we start this, and that's going to be about June of next year. And we're thinking at that stage of the game, our debt will be down to about $1.6 million. The Generosity Committee that I mentioned earlier, that Steve Bloomquist is the chair, is going to come together with a game plan to put a budget together and a plan to raise extra money to fund this project. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But based on all the things that we've got going on here, the way we're prepaying, the fact that we're going to have a campaign to raise extra money, we think the debt is going to be about $4.5 million. So you see, we're starting out at $4.5 million. The debt service on that is about $26,000 a month. Currently, we're paying about $15,009 a month. And keep in mind, that was based on $2.7 million when the loan started, which gets us to a monthly need of about $10,000 a month in addition to what we're collecting now, or about $120,000, a little bit more than $120,000 a year. And none of these projections are looking at any of our new members coming in the interim. So this is all people that we have in here right this minute. So how are we going to pay for all this? We have a generosity committee chaired by Steve Bloomquist. Dave Anderson is with Generous, which is a company that we've asked to help us with this so that we come together and put a professional program together to raise the extra funds. Other members on that committee are Brent Heffron, Pastor Laura Allen, Greg Powell, Melanie Scott, Brad Smith, Lynn Truitt, Ann Vogt, and me. The Beyond Fund. What is the Beyond Fund? Well, I mentioned to you, the Generosity Committee has come together to form a game plan that we'll roll out to the whole congregation in January. And what we're planning to do, among other things, have a sermon series and a lot more information about what we're planning to do. Before we get into that, just in all the details that we have, one thing that probably makes sense is a little church finance 101. If you remember, several times since October in the last 30 days or so, both Pastor Michael and Steve Bloomquist have communicated with us that we're not going to have a typical stewardship campaign in October. Fear not, we're coming back to you. We're going to wait till January when we have a better game plan for you. But typically what churches will do, we'll have an annual campaign to raise funds for the operation of the church. And then when other things come along, other special events, whether we're adding on to our parking lot, buying a piece of property, expanding a building, or building a new building, we'll come to you and say, okay, let's come together, let's figure out how much we need, and we come and ask for a special budget just for that. Well, the Beyond Fund's a little different. What we want to do in January is come to you in January and say, for the next 24 months, we want to ask you to make a monthly contribution, your normal operating piece, and we need extra to fund the new building that we want to take a look at building. And the idea is it'll be a 24-month commitment. We're not going to talk to you about it again, certainly in the next year, but as we get toward the end of that 24-month commitment, we certainly will come back and ask for the same type of thing going forward. That's everything. If you're already thinking ahead and you want to get a little extra kitty in the church budget for this year, if you're doing some tax planning for this year, that certainly is welcome. We would certainly like to have that. Just make sure you put on your check that it's for the Beyond Fund, and we'll make sure it gets credited to the right place. But we're not going to start the Beyond campaign proper until January. And the whole idea is to include everyone in the church, whether you give every week when you come in, monthly, if you have an automatic debit to your account, or if you want to have one large check that you make. Now, Gary has a few more comments for you.
I mentioned about Randall and his team, but Steve and the generosity team have been meeting as well for 16 months and working on all this stuff. We put them together at the same time, and we've all trying to sing off the same page of music. So let me tell you what we just told you, okay? And I'll summarize it. So what we told you is we got an amazing opportunity to go out and make disciples of Jesus Christ. In fact, our pond is so well stocked that there's 27,000 people in 5 miles who say they have faith, but they don't have a spiritual home. And we also know that we're growing like very few churches in this country, 204 new members. So we have some issues that we're working on, mostly where we're going to put people and what ministries we have for them. And then our friend Ron came up and showed us some structural things that we're thinking about doing. So the idea here is to push those walls out, take that ceiling off, put seats all the way back to the door, if you will, in the LSU colors. And then he also showed us this beautiful new space that we could create called a connection space. See if I can make magic happen here. Imagine that. And then I want you also to imagine that we take what you today know as the education building, which has all kinds of things going on for all kinds of people, and it basically becomes a wing for Sunday school, mostly for children. And imagine instead of that being our sanctuary and our music suite, it becomes a children's theater. How cool would that be? And all kinds of remodeling. So those are the major 3 things that when Frank said $4.2 million, it was for all that. So more seating, new space, renovation of education, and new office space. So 4 out of the 5 priorities I mentioned to you, the teams have been able to hit. So we're very excited about that. So lastly, let me just remind us where we're at in all this. So I mentioned we've been working on this a couple years, but we just shared it with you in the spring in our town halls. And so this is our fall town halls, and we're doing this in lieu of a church conference that we're all going to have. Now, I grew up in the Baptist faith, and we all met as a congregation annually. Well, those who didn't, run out after the service. But we had a meeting and we voted on things, and that's what we did. And guess what? We as Methodists are going to have a chance to do that. November the 22nd at 2:30, we're going to have a church conference. Now, LA did a great job in the announcements, and you had a handout in your bulletin, and we're going to keep trying to hammer out what exactly you're going to be coming to vote for. All we're going to ask you to do is take what we've told you tonight. Here's the need we see. Here's the solution we perceive. Here's the things we think are important priority-wise. And here's the dollars and cents we think it's going to take. And we've shown you that we think we can hit that number. And that's what we're going to ask you to vote on. If you're good with that and you say yes, then we go real detailed in our detailed plans. And so Frank's also told you about a campaign. That would start in January. Now, some of you I know are going 4.2 and you're looking at that beautiful building and you're starting to do the math. And here's what I want you to do. I told you when we first started this is about mission, folks. Making disciples of Jesus Christ, right? Now, that's not just for those 27 out the door. It's for everybody I'm looking at. That's our mission here. And when we talk about discipleship, and for those of you who have been to the Disciple Path class, one of those classes is about your stewardship and your giving. This is what this is about. This is about being disciples of Jesus Christ. And I'll keep hammering on that and trying to remind us of that. Fact of the matter is, if we all did what the man tells us to do, we wouldn't need to borrow money. Okay? But that's just not the case. That's not reality. But I want you to think about that. So the Beyond campaign, we're going to think more about that. Michael's going to put it hard on you with some sermons too. You be ready. January's going to be fun. Don't go anywhere. And then my granddaddy used to say he wore suspenders and a belt. He wanted to be sure. And the Methodists, we're good about that too. So we're going to have a district committee on building and location review. Now, we've already had one. We went before the same committee already and shared exactly what we shared with you, and they had to approve it. Now, why? Well, if we go belly up and things don't work out, guess who owns all this? The Methodist church as a whole. So they're involved in this planning too. So they've already done it. But now we're going to have the Beyond campaign, and we'll have your pledges, and we're going to blow our goal out of the water, and they're going to be so enthused, and they're just going to probably pop champagne at that meeting because we've done such a great job. They're very excited about us. We're a shining star in South Carolina. But we got to go through that process. And then the last part of the process is we have another Advent charge conference, which means we tote back out the district guy, and he comes, he sits with council, and we vote. We vote because you've given your pledges, you've started to give money, we've seen that come along. The banks have talked to us. They're going to give us all kinds of money for hardly any debt percentage. It's amazing what they'll do for us. And the plans are detailed, and they're right. And we are ready to go. And I don't know when that's going to be, but that's the last step, is that Advent Charge Conference. And we vote on that. And I don't know if that's spring, I don't know if that's summer, I don't know. But it's sometime around there, a little later. When does a shovel go on the ground? I can't tell you for certain, especially because I'm on video, and they'll hold me to it. It'll be sometime next year. That's about the safest thing I can tell you right now. So that's what we've told you and shown you tonight. Preliminary plans.